Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Disney. Disney is facing disaster with their cable channels. 8 of their cable channels were dropped from Charter Spectrum's system, which means they lost 20% of all their subscribers on those channels. Instead of those channels, Charter demanded to have Disney Plus, and it looks like Disney agreed to give them Disney Plus for free. So what happens with these 8 channels now? That's kind of what Hollywood is asking, and it doesn't seem like Disney has much information on it because they never thought this would happen to them. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from Deadline, Disney top executives assuring staff of their commitment to FXX, Freeform, and other channels dropped by Charter Communications. So this negotiation with Charter Communications was basically this. Disney went to them and said, look, we need a multi-year commitment from you or you're not going to get ESPN and all of our wonderful channels. Charter said back to them, you know what? We're not that interested in all of your channels. You're going to need to work with us if you want us to take any of your content. Disney said no. Charter said, okay, well, fine. We'll drop all your channels. We're just not interested in working with you. And then Disney said, what was that deal again? Maybe we can work something out. So what wound up happening is they signed a deal with Charter. We don't have what the details are, but we do know that Disney agreed to drop 8 of their channels from the system of 19 channels, and now they're giving them Disney Plus at no charge. Apparently, they say a wholesale rate, but it looks like the wholesale rate is the same rate they otherwise would have paid for those 8 channels. So it's essentially a swap out for those 8 channels. Plus, they're giving them ESPN Plus. Plus, they're allowing Charter to resell those channels to their internet-only customers, which actually is good business for Disney if they can generate advertising sales and additional sales for Disney Plus subscriptions. But what happens if you work for these 8 channels and you help produce the content and you do the programming and the planning? Like, you can't work for a channel that's not getting distributed. These channels exist at this point to generate very good revenue for Disney, but also to produce content that they later offer on their own streaming services. So if you're one of these cable companies, you're busy paying them huge licensing fees for Freeform, that's one of the 8 channels, or FXX. And these channels are also available for streaming on Hulu, which is another service that Disney at present owns 2/3 of. So the cable companies finally said, look, no wonder people are canceling the service. They could just subscribe to Hulu and basically get the same channels. This is getting a little bit ridiculous, Disney. And Disney, of course, didn't agree, but had no choice but to go along with what Charter said they wanted to do. What also is expected to happen is other cable companies that represent another huge percentage of Disney's customers are also going to come back and say, look, we're not going to take a deal that's less than the Charter deal. Charter is only number 2 on the list of Disney's customers. Disney's number 1 customer is Comcast, roughly around the same number of subscribers as Charter, a little bit more, but they're certainly not going to take a deal that's any less than what Charter wanted. So what happens to Freeform? That's what they're asking in Hollywood Reporter, because Freeform was one of the first cable channels to come into existence, has had a lot of different owners. Disney paid a lot to acquire it, and now they can't even get distribution for it at all of their cable companies. Coming from Hollywood Reporter, what's next for Freeform after being dropped by Charter? Disney's deal with the pay TV giant suggests that in an accelerated cost-cutting era, no channel is truly safe. Freeform, the Disney-owned cable channel that caters to young women, was dropped from Spectrum Charter lineups as part of Disney's landmark deal with Charter Communications. It was no small decision, with Freeform in some 74 million homes at the end of last year, and with Charter's nearly 15 million cable TV households no longer having access. But when we looked across the portfolio to try to identify where the greatest value in the deal was to us, we definitely made some trade-offs, Disney Entertainment co-chairman Dana Walden told The Hollywood Reporter after the Spectrum deal was announced. She noted that channels like Freeform already served as a pipeline of programming for streaming services like Hulu. And if you're one of those cable companies and people keep canceling the subscription to your cable services, you're thinking, hey, I'm not really interested in subsidizing all of the cost of producing these shows just so you can put them on a competing network for much less money. It doesn't seem really fair. And it's hard to believe Disney got away with this for as many years as they did, but they certainly did. All thanks to the strength of ESPN and the leverage that gave Disney, because Disney could say in any of these contract negotiations, look, if you don't like what we're doing with our content and you don't like the deal, I guess you don't need to have ESPN on your service anymore, which terrified all of the cable companies because they needed ESPN as an absolute keystone to any basic cable program to resell to their customers. But not anymore. While the deal saw a number of other channels were dropped in the deal, the dropping of Freeform suggests that as repercussions of the deal are felt across the pay TV ecosystem, no channel is truly safe. Freeform has a long and winding history that traces back to the earliest days of cable TV. Founded in 1977 by the evangelist Pat Robertson as a spin-off of his Christian broadcast network, local TV stations, the channel effectively became the first satellite basic cable network in America. Robertson recalled to the Archive of American Television in an interview, HBO was founded a half-decade earlier as a premium cable service, and Ted Turner put up WTCG's signal on cable and satellite beginning in 1976, but Robertson's CBN service was the original basic cable channel. It was programmed with Christian talk shows and sermons, but mixed in classic TV shows. Robertson told the Archive that old westerns were among the major draws. They brought the biggest ratings all week long. I mean, big ratings beat the other stations because we just stacked them from 12 or 1 o'clock on Saturday all day long, one after another, he recalled. We had Bonanza, we had Gunsmoke, you name it, they were all there. But the channel that would become Freeform would be bought and sold many times over the decades, with many brand iterations to boot. In the late 1980s, the channel left Robertson's ministry and became for profit, rebranding itself the Family Channel. The deal was financed in part by the cable TV mogul John Malone, who in a twist of fate is also the largest outside shareholder in Charter Communications. He owns like 26% of it through one of his Liberty Media companies. He also owns a very large percentage of Warner Brothers Discovery, which competes with Disney in multiple ways, including with their Max subscription service. It's also understood that Malone is the guy who really pushed and thought through this deal on Disney to get them to break their cable bundle and lose these 8 channels. In 1997, the channel was sold for $1.9 billion to Rupert Murdoch's News Corp and the company controlled by media mogul Haim Saban, and it was rebranded as the Fox Family Channel. Just a few years later, with Saban seeking an exit, the companies agreed to sell Fox Family to the Walt Disney Company for $2.9 billion, plus the assumption of its debt. Fox Family was renamed ABC Family, with the company trying out a number of brands, identities, and target audiences before settling on Freeform and its current target audience in 2016. Despite its many names and iterations over the years, Freeform still has one critical connection to its founding. It still runs the 700 Club, the religious show hosted by Robertson for most of its run, a term of that original sale decades ago that still holds to this day. After months of focus groups and research, former ABC Family president Tom Ashim oversaw the rebranding of the network in 2016 to Freeform. The intention was to focus on what he dubbed Becomers, the group that adults 18 to 34 who are experiencing first in their lives, like love and work, as they become adults. Ashim, the former Nickelodeon general manager and CEO of Newsweek, took over the network in 2013 from Michael Riley, who brought Foster to the network under Disney's Ann Sweeney. Riley joined the then ABC Family in 2010 when he took over for Paul Lee, who was promoted to run ABC's entertainment programming after 6 years at the helm of the younger skewing cabler. As fallout from all the Hollywood strikes right now, Freeform is in a state of pause. The network is currently ramping up for its most watched programming blocks of the year with its annual month-long celebrations tied to Halloween and Christmas with a Disney-themed one sandwich between them. As for the future of the network, sources say SETI remains committed to scripted originals with classic young adult fare that targets middle-aged women akin to the OC. The network remains profitable. The theme programming blocks remain a favorite for Freeform's ad sales team, as Disney insiders are said not to be worried about losing Charter's 15 million homes. Freeform now becomes the latest network to focus on its brand like another Disney-owned network, FX, while the bulk of FX originals, for example, debuts exclusively on Hulu, and not on the linear network. The majority of Freeform's viewership comes from its content streaming on Hulu the day after it airs on the cabler. How confusing is this if you're interested in following the channels or any of the shows? And why would you even bother to go trying to keep track of this? Just look on the streaming service if you're actually interested in these channels, and they'll eventually show up there. And then you can binge watch them. As part of Disney and Charter's new carriage deal, Disney Plus will be included in Spectrum's main TV packages at no extra charge. And that's how you know Charter Spectrum is not paying anything for Disney Plus. Because if they're not going to charge their customers for it, they're not just going to absorb the cost of it and not charge people. Charter will pay Disney when they resell the service to their broadband-only customers, and that will be profitable for both Disney and Charter, but not for the existing subscribers. Freeform's content remains available on Hulu, where sources say signature shows like Good Trouble and former hits Secret Life and The Fosters have seen an uptick in viewing. Looking ahead, there will be a Hulu tab coming to Disney Plus in 2024, which means Charter's customers who subscribe to Disney Plus will still technically have access to the Freeform shows. Of course, Disney is going to agree to and will do whatever it takes to keep the revenue coming in from these cable companies. These are multi-year deals they get, so they get promises to pay. In the case of Charter, it looks like it was approximately $2.3 billion for what should be a 10-year deal. We don't have details on it yet. We will eventually get all the details on what Charter promised to pay Disney. But at 20% of their market, $2.3 billion a year times 5 is $11.5 billion a year, maybe with some increases, maybe with some decreases if they lose subscribers, plus additional revenue that Disney gets from advertising from Disney Plus, plus additional revenue that Disney gets when the cable services resell their streaming service, Disney Plus, or resell ESPN Plus, or resell Hulu. But what happens to the cable channels when they've lost 20% of their revenues, and then Comcast says, look, I want the same deal as Charter, and they lose another 25% of all their revenue? Will they continue to staff all of these cable channels, producing all of this content and marketing all this content, just to resell it to a few cable channels and then to resell it to Hulu, their own service? They might, but they're losing revenue while they're doing it. Getting additional revenue for the streaming service, Disney Plus, is great for them. Getting additional advertising revenue is great for them. But are they going to take that revenue and then put it towards the lost revenue from these 8 cable channels? They need to figure out what they're going to do. They need to embrace what the new reality is. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.